Come along, children. Now we're going to have a little music.
What's up, y'all? This is your boy RB3. We are back for another review here on First Cut, and I'm here with Sabrina.
Hello.
And we are talking about Thor, Love and Thunder, the new Taika Waititi film, the fourth Thor movie, starring Chris Hemsworth as Thor, Tessa Thompson as Valkyrie, and the return of Natalie Portman as Jane Foster. Sabrina, first off, I know we're both big fans of Taika Waititi's work, and we both saw Jojo Rabbit together. That was one of the first movies we saw together. And we obviously we both love Thor Ragnarok. So what were you looking forward to and seeing this movie?
Honestly, I really didn't even watch the trailer. Actually, I didn't watch the trailers at all going into this, so I had no idea. I knew with Natalie Portman coming back, there was going to be that Lady Thor storyline that we're all kind of familiar with. That's what I was looking forward to the most. Something else to kind of add into the story of Thor, and still keep it focused on him, but really highlight the people around him as well, which I feel like with a lot of MCU movies, we don't really get a lot of, I guess, like richness with the backstories of a lot of these side characters. So having Jane Foster coming back, another spotlight on her, Natalie Portman, I think it was at Comic-Con, San Diego Comic-Con, where she like lifted up Mjolnir. I thought that was so cool. So I was really looking forward to that. And then also just Taika Waititi's filmmaking. Like you said, both you and I are big fans of it. We love Ragnarok. So I was just looking forward to seeing that next step in what they were going to do with this kind of pivot to Thor that we've seen with Ragnarok in this one.
Yeah, no, I was very excited to see that pivot too, especially when it's especially coming out of Avengers Endgame. We saw Thor kind of being, some people would say out of shape. I thought he was looking pretty good personally. And then he yeah, dad bod, what's wrong with that? And then they obviously set him up to be hanging out with the Guardians of the Galaxy at the end, calling it the Asgardians of the Galaxy. What did you think of that aspect going into this movie? Like, were you looking forward to the Guardians, or was that more of a surprise for you? Or
I liked the chemistry that we saw with them in the previous film, but I didn't really want this story to be so intertwined with theirs. And this is a non-spoiler review, so we're not going to be getting into a lot of details here, but I liked what they ended up doing within this film. We got a really good taste of it, but it didn't take up too much because there were so many other things that we were kind of being introduced to with this film. Like, I'm about to pivot over to you for this, but Christian Bale, one of the best actors ever, coming into this role where the MCU is really kind of putting the spotlight on the horror of a lot of their villains, like we saw with Multiverse of Madness, Moon Knight, we got a little bit of that too. This was probably one of my favorite villains in a very, very long time. I want to see what you kind of think about that as well, RB3.
Yeah, I mean, Christian Bale, he was a good villain. He was definitely a good villain. He was one of the more like he definitely didn't have as much of a backstory as I think, other iconic villains like a Thanos, like a Killmonger, like a Loki have gotten like in the past, to where by the end of it, we're kind of more sympathetic to his story. We're sympathetic to his story just by like the actions that he takes and like how far he's willing to go. But I think, they spend so much of the rest of the movie focused on other aspects that they don't really give that as much to his character, which is where I kind of like, we're kind of talking about the Guardians, and you mentioned how you liked their inclusion, like kind of in this movie. That's kind of where I like depart a little bit. I kind of think I didn't like their inclusion in this movie at all. I thought they were completely useless, to be honest. Like
They were.
I really do feel like they had a version of this movie written, and then Marvel was like, "Oh, by the way, like our last movie ended with the Guardians of the Galaxy. Like you have to start this movie with that too." And I just felt like they're like, "Okay, I guess we'll figure it out." So I just thought that was the most like random, ridiculous. If you would have cut out the however many minutes that the Guardians was in it and replaced it with more backstory for Christian Bale's character and for, frankly, Chris Hemsworth's Thor and Jane Foster, which I feel like they did get a significant amount of screen time, but I do feel like, dang, there's so much potential in this, like, completely wasted time. I felt like it was completely wasted, all of that time with the Guardians. So
that's what I liked, honestly. Like, I appreciated that we got a little bit of taste of it, and like, without spoiling, we didn't get a lot of it. They're not intertwined deeply within the story. It really falls off kind of right after the beginning. And I think with Christian Bale's Gorr, I think we got a lot set up personally with his motivations, and that's where I understood. And I think also just highlighting that like loss of faith with his story, seeing the reality of the people that you look up to or whatever you practice in your life. I think after especially the past few years, kind of seeing that all stripped away and seeing the reality of all the situations and things we look up to and things we put on a pedestal, and seeing like that's not the reality at all times. I thought that was very rich. It wasn't a ton of time spent, but I think it was just enough for him, for like us to understand him and kind of relate to him in that way. And then I did like that we just got just that teensy bit of the Guardians. We got a little bit of their chemistry. There was a little bit of fun there, but I think that kind of set the tone for the rest of the film for me. Like going on to what I kind of didn't really love about this, the comedy. I know we just talked about Thor Ragnarok. We just talked about how much we love Taika Waititi's films, but I think that this one was Ragnarok dialed up to an 11. So anything that I didn't like in Ragnarok, I feel like it really kind of like shined through with this one. And I think some of the comedy was a little bit jarring. Like we've talked about this with Marvel. They kind of have this problem, but I feel like this is more of a Taika Waititi problem, to be honest, of just not knowing what to maybe cut out, like what jokes. Like it felt like it was just joke after joke after joke. And to me, it kind of was more in line and played more like a bottle episode of television, you know, where there's just this one story and it's like this little side quest a character has. That's what I felt like this movie was for me with Thor, where it wasn't the most important or impactful outside of Jane Foster. I feel like we didn't really get a lot of growth on his end as a character, but also we've seen so much for the past few movies for him, and this was a fourth, which this is the first time obviously that we've gotten a fourth with a character like this. So yeah, that's kind of the one thing where I liked it at the time. I had a lot of fun with it. I was laughing along. It was exciting, but when there was a joke that didn't hit, it took me out of the movie. How'd you feel about all of that?
Yeah, I would definitely say probably about like 30 to 40% of the jokes fall flat in this movie. And that's kind of like what like really kind of hurts. Like there's a good amount, and I'm somebody who laughs at almost anything. So
You do?
yeah, it's real tough to like give me and say, ooh, that joke didn't work. But there were moments where even me, like the easy, sense of humor was like, yo, what? And then which is fine, not everything can be hit or miss, but I think it really came to the detriment of the dramatic elements, right? Because
Yeah.
I think we have a villain that is as dramatically acted with Christian Bale's as Gorr's, as Gorr's character is, with a motivation that is pretty powerful, and is a lot of times just kind of undercut with like these random moments of kind of humor, and which is cool, but I do think like give me the comedy balance with the character moments. I think Ragnarok balanced it out real perfectly with having humor that related to the characters, but it didn't really do that as well for me. It kind of almost made Thor, and this is the exact criticism I had of Thor Ragnarok, and which I kind of put to the side because I realized that like other elements of Thor Ragnarok more, but they made Thor so stupid. Like they made him so like
Yeah.
dumb. And in this movie, it's like, yo, he's like almost a dimwit. Like he's not even like any kind of intelligent. It's like they do the What If show on Disney Plus where they have an episode called Party Thor, where it's literally Thor being like a party frat boy, like, hey, I'm Party Thor and I like to party. And it's almost indistinguishable from what his character is like now. Like it's literally almost the exact same guy. So it's like, I don't know. I don't really like that aspect of it. I think there should have been more of more seriousness taken, especially when I mean, listen, I'm not going to tone police, but I do think like I would have liked to see more seriousness in it a little bit. If you think the MCU is too funny, you're gonna hate this movie for sure.
Exactly. I was talking to a coworker and they were just like, hey, I don't want to know anything, but like I didn't like Ragnarok. What did you think about this film? Because I'm very excited to see it. And I was like, this is that times 100. They really leaned into all those elements that they introduced in Ragnarok, and they work with that film because they were able to balance that tone, which this one, I felt like there were so many dramatic and heavy moments, and those did hit, but then like you kind of mentioned, it was undercut by then like joke after joke. And I compare it to Sonic the Hedgehog came out a few months ago, and that movie is like joke after joke after joke, and not all of them land, but it's more forgiving. In this film, it's different because it is really heavy and there are a lot of stakes. And I think the introduction of Natalie Portman's character, everything that she did at the beginning of the film, like in the first act, the second act, third act, every single thing, she was absolutely incredible. I do think it was a amazing choice to bring her back for this one. And it's just, this is a character arc that I am going to be I don't know, kind of thinking about for a very long time in Thor. She's not one of those side characters. She's not just tossed away. She really had so many beautiful moments in this film that make the other two Thor films, which I'm not a huge fan of, definitely like hit harder. Like it really does. Her absence in them is definitely felt looking back.
I definitely enjoy seeing her. I enjoy seeing Valkyrie return, Tessa Thompson's character, because it was funny seeing how much, they kind of teased her being, bisexual in the last movie, but they really lean into it on this one in the sense of she's like constantly flirting with Jane Foster like the entire time, which I thought was just absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, and just her daily life. They had her at like grand openings for things. The fact that she was like an influential figure in that society, in that world, I thought that was really funny because honestly, that's exactly what it would have been like. Sometimes in the MCU, when we go outside of moments and we talk about the play that we saw in, I forgot even what TV show, what was that? Falcon and Winter Soldier?
Oh, Hawkeye.
There we go. I didn't watch either of those, but I did see glimpses and moments. But like going outside of it and seeing like what would our world be like if we did have these heroes? They would be regarded as celebrities. They would be at events, at openings, at things like this. So it was really funny to see that with Valkyrie. And like you mentioned, I do love that they really went for it with her sexuality in this film and the chemistry between her and Natalie Portman. I'm pretty sure Tessa Thompson could have chemistry with like a piece of wood. Truly. I don't know how she does it, but she just exudes so much chemistry and like just like class and like swag on screen. I don't know how to describe it other than that. It's this mix of everything that just makes her a delight to watch. And like her juxtaposed Chris Hemsworth's like himbo character of Thor, like you mentioned, kind of being like frat boy, a little bit dumb to be honest. I think it works when they're together. It's when he's by himself and he's dealing with some stuff. I'm like, I know you're better than this. You have gone through horrific like tragic incidences. You've saved the world a million times, and there's times where he does get himself together. There's like moments in this film where that happens, but then again it kind of falls apart when we see him a moment later and he's like acting a certain way. So I like this film. I don't want to trash on it. It is really fun. But yeah, like you mentioned earlier, if Ragnarok is not your thing, I don't think that this is really going to be your jam as well. But what saved this movie for me is how fast paced it was and how like high energy. This movie didn't drag. We were going from one thing to the next and it felt like a breeze. That's why to me it did feel like that bottle episode of television, because I could have sworn this movie was an hour, to be honest, and not in a bad way. I think things were fleshed out, things were developed, tonally it was a little bit inconsistent, but ultimately it was just a really fun time. And I love the post-credit scene. Actually both, I like both of them a lot, but I loved one of the new characters that we're introducing into the MCU, and the actor that plays the character was something that was a huge surprise to me, and I love to see it.
One other thing that I think was really I want to shout out real quick was like that I don't know if it was like the Olympus, but where all the guys were hanging out, and we got to meet Russell Crowe as Zeus. To me, hysterical character, absolutely hysterical. That was probably my number one standout in terms of like in terms of scenes, but also in terms of like new characters that they're introducing. I thought he was really, really funny. So
I do agree. I think that was a really great part. And I think all the actors were doing everything that they needed to do for this film. Anything like the comedy and stuff like that was kind of the cons to me. And so it's not as rewatchable or as strong to me as Ragnarok was, like we talked about. Ragnarok was almost pitch perfect. Like, honestly, obviously everything's subjective, so somebody might not think that. But in terms of myself, I look at Ragnarok as a perfect film in terms of like, I don't know, just how big it is, how grand it is, but at the same time really contained for a specific character's solo film. And all the elements that they brought into this one and all the characters, I think were so perfect for the character of Thor. Bringing in Lady Thor, like we mentioned, all of that was extremely essential for this film. And I think when it works, it's at like 100%. And then even when it dips down a little bit, it's still very entertaining and it's a lot of fun. And it's also just like really fresh for the MCU. Like we're talking about going into this new kind of chapter in everything with a lot of the characters that we know and love are not going to be present anymore. At least we know a character like Thor, who's super funny, he's very powerful, he's able to ground every single moment. Seeing him again in this way and probably in future films as well, like I do think it's going to be a really good time and fans are going to be excited to see all the elements that they bring into this one. You know, Taika, he does his thing, he knows what he's doing, he is a fantastic filmmaker, I think, objectively. And when it came to the fight sequences, the choreography, everything that was grand, he nailed it. Like you mentioned, that black and white scene, I loved how they incorporated like children into this movie too. We see children present throughout so much of this. We see like New Asgard and we see the way that society kind of like is there. And it is really, really interesting. So I would say if I have to rate this movie, I would say it's like 7 out of 10, 7.5 out of 10 maybe. And that's actually, that really isn't super low. Like I'm not trying to say this is low. It's very hard for me to give out like a 9 or a 10 to a film that kind of like deals with like tonal inconsistencies, because that takes me out, and that's something that I really want to see in a story like this. I want to be completely sucked in, and there was moments where I was a little bit out. What would you rate this film? I'm wondering.
If I were to rate it out of 10, yeah, it would probably be around a strong 7 as well. 7, 6.5, 6.5, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
and that's not like that's not detriment to the movie at all. Like I think that's a pretty high score coming out. For relative sake, like if I'm giving this a 7, Thor 2, you know, The Dark World is like a strong like 4 or 3. So like that's what I'm talking about on this scale. It's really good. It's a really good movie. This movie's really good if you like MCU movies. You know, so.
Yeah, that's exactly what this is. Like honestly, to maybe like film Twitter or like super hard film buffs, this might be a little bit of a harder sell because this is Taika Waititi going 100. And I know, you know, film Twitter loves to rag on movies that are at a certain place, but
Yeah,
I
Marvel
think that
movies
this
especially.
one, yeah, Marvel movies, you know, like, and it does make sense looking at things like the Batman and seeing how, you know, that one was listed, wasn't it that one that was listed as like an auteur or like an artisan film?
Yeah,
Yeah.
artisan, yeah, cinema. Oh man, come on now.
Yeah, so like, you know, sometimes we see superhero films that are up to that scale. Same thing as a Joker, which I know not all of us are huge fans of, but some are. Seeing stuff like that versus this is the very straight out of a comic book, high energy, like a lot of comedy. This is all of that. So it just depends on what your specific taste is. So this worked enough for me, but then again, like I mentioned, the times that I didn't necessarily love, it really took me out. The standout to me 100%, and the thing that I will go back to this film for, is Natalie Portman's performance as Lady Thor, and also Tessa Thompson as Valkyrie. And I do want to say Chris Hemsworth is great. Like with what he had to do in this film and what like the screenplay kind of entailed, he did do a really great job. And I think he's come into this character and really made it unique, because Thor 1, Thor 2, I don't vibe with as much. They don't really have a lot of replay value for me. But with these newer ones, I love how every single time he kind of, you know, with like, what was it called, like Immigrant Song in Ragnarok, with this one we have a lot of really fun needle drops. We have like Enya, different things like that. Like I really
AC/DC.
appreciated that. Yeah, I appreciated that so much. And we do get a new kind of dad rock Thor. This is almost like something I would find like old pictures of in like a suitcase somewhere, where it's like, yeah, you know, this was my past life. Like I was rocking out, like I was doing my thing. So I thought that was really fun.
Right. And his cape was really bright and red in this movie for some reason.
Yeah.
I didn't get why his cape was that thick and red and bright, but that's
True. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, I was something I was looking at like, why is it so bright? But yeah, those are our thoughts. Let us know what you think in the comments down below. Are you looking forward to Thor Ragnarok? Thor Ragnarok? Are you looking forward to Thor Love and Thunder? Did you love Thor Ragnarok? Are you a fan of Taika Waititi? Are you a fan of this new Thor direction, or do you prefer Thor 1 and 2? But if you do prefer those movies, are you excited to see Jane Fonda coming back as well? Jane Fonda. They make that joke in the movie.
I wish.
Yeah, right. Jane Foster. If you're a fan of Jane Foster, let us know in the comments down below. Sabrina, where can people follow you?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at SabrinaXMonica, also on Twitter at Sabrina on Film.
And you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Director RB3.
And you can follow us at First Cut TMO on Twitter and Instagram.
That's right. And be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. For the First Cut, I'm RB3.
I'm Sabrina.
And we're peacing out. Peace out, y'all.